quick glance at the clock means, time for the press preview. A first look at the front pages as they arrive. Time to see what's making the headlines with the New Statesman's Deputy Online Editor, Rachel Cunliffe, and the Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. More from them in just a moment, but let's take a look at the front pages that we have, starting with the Daily Mirror. It, of course, splashing with the birth of Lilibet Diana, Prince Harry and Meghan's new daughter. The Metro remarks on the newborn's name being a nod to the Queen with this headline, "Gran gesture." Daily Star having a little bit of fun with the baby's first name, the headline, "Woman has Lil Baby." The Telegraph, meanwhile, reporting that the Health Secretary has admitted it might just be necessary to push back the scheduled loosening of COVID restrictions on the 21st of June if data over the next week heads in the wrong direction. Compare and contrast, though, the Mail urging Conservative backbenchers to lobby Mr Hancock not to delay reopening any further. Here's the Times. It says British holidaymakers face chaos at airports and testing sites as they rush to try and make it back to the UK from Portugal. The Guardian, though, reporting on warnings that yesterday's global corporate tax deal has a loophole that could allow Amazon to escape paying significantly more tax. And a shortage of chips. No, not my dinner. Instead, little things inside electrical products. That's fueling concerns over the availability of cars and other consumer goods, according to the FT. As mentioned, we're joined tonight by Rachel Cunliffe and Tom Slater. Lovely to see the pair of you and plenty for us to chat. So Tom, let's dive straight on in and take us to the front of the Daily Telegraph. Their headline there, Matt Hancock hinting at a delay to reopening. I would say he's doing rather more than a gentle hint, in fact.
No, certainly. I mean, today when he was doing media round, he said that the government was essentially open to the question of delaying the June the 21st reopening. This is the first time we've really heard such language, I think I'm right in saying. So far, you've heard the government very much sticking to the line that there's nothing that they see in the data at the moment for things to have to be changed or held back. Boris Johnson saying that even last week, but still just kind of hedging their bets and waiting for more information to come in. In this piece, you can see various different scientific advisors giving their view, many of them urging caution. But I think it's fair to say across a lot of certainly the right-leaning papers tonight, a lot of pushback as well at the idea that all of these months in, that the roadmap should be delayed. Despite the Indian variant, things are looking pretty good. There does seem to be a fair bit of pushback.
I mean, Rachel, just sticking with the Telegraph for a second, isn't this, in a sense, though, a bit of a statement of the obvious? The data, we are told, is constantly under review. The June 21st date is still a few weeks away. Wouldn't they always have been looking at the data to make sure that reopening on June the 21st was going to be possible?
Well, it's the contradiction, isn't it, between what Boris Johnson said right at the beginning of the roadmap, relying on data, not dates, i.e. having those dates penciled in the earliest possible dates for unlocking, but moving forward, looking at the data and checking that unlocking could go ahead at those stages. Unfortunately, the way the government, particularly the Prime Minister, has been acting over the past couple of months, those dates really have become deadlines rather than targets. And a huge amount of expectation for business, for society, especially among ministers, rests on that June the 21st date. So backtracking on it now will make the government look like a failure, particularly if it has been driven by the Indian variant, when the government refused to put India on the red list until 2 weeks after the awareness of that strain was growing in the UK. So it's a problem for the government, particularly because if this does get delayed, it will make it look like Boris Johnson is personally liable, which is obviously a responsibility that he has so far managed to avoid. I think what the government's waiting to see with the increase in transmission and cases is whether that leads to the 2-week lag, an increase in hospitalizations and sadly deaths, as we've seen with other waves, or if the vaccine rollout is now at a point where, yes, cases can rise, the R number can go above 1, but enough people have been vaccinated. They're hoping 60% of adults vaccinated by June 21st with 2 jabs, infinitely more with having at least 1, whether that is enough to break the link between high number of cases and hospitalisations.
Tom, I mean, the front of tomorrow's Daily Mail, I mean, don't wobble now, ministers, as the article makes clear, some of the pressure, in fact, coming from the people that sit behind the Prime Minister. Let's just leave to one side Matt Hancock saying that, you know, the link has been severed but not broken. I mean, I don't know if he's got a different definition of severed from me. But do you think that when it comes to making a decision about reopening on the 21st, there will be political concerns in the Prime Minister's mind as much as anything else?
There'll definitely be political concerns. And also, at the end of the day, even though the government has liked to lean on the scientists to say that they're following the quote-unquote science, there are trade-offs in all of this. There are questions that can't really just be answered purely by the data, as we're often being presented. We're weighing up the potential threat of, again, a rise in cases against the questions of the very real costs of lockdown. I think it's just important to remember that in terms of where we are with the virus at the moment, not only do we have this remarkable vaccine rollout, but when the roadmap was first set out, SAGE modelled all kinds of different scenarios as to what they thought would happen, particularly, as you say, with hospitalisations, because with COVID, that's really what we've got to worry about. Are people ending up in hospital? Are people ending up seriously ill? Are people tragically dying? And the number of daily admissions to hospital at the moment are below SAGE's best case scenario. We're in a very, very good situation. And I think what many of the papers, as you say, the Daily Mail leading the charge there, are calling for is for Boris Johnson to listen to the good news and to get us back to normal, because loads of people across the country really need that, not just for the economy's sake, but for their own well-being, frankly.
Again, Rachel, let's just stick with this for a second. I mean, there will be people who disagree with those Tory backbenchers saying, look, we've got to reopen no matter what on June the 21st. But even quoted in the article, one of them, Desmond Swain, says this, you know, the more the government moves the goalposts, the more people will be made redundant. I mean, that is a statement of fact, isn't it?
It is a statement of fact, particularly in industries like hospitality and entertainment and large events that have been effectively completely shut down for the past 15 months. And we're gearing up towards this day as government support has been limited. All of their business plans, all of the plans for the survivals of their company are based on that date. And I think Andrew Lloyd Webber was talking about potentially suing the government if they miss that date, just simply because the business costs and the risks are so high. And I think there's also a kind of public awareness. Vaccine rollout is so successful. We've had very low vaccine hesitancy in this country compared to what we've seen in other countries. And if you start moving the goalpost, as Desmond Swain says there, and you start telling people that, yes, you got your vaccine and you got both your jabs, and everyone you know got both your jabs, but we still can't open as planned, even though we promised that was what we would do, that's going to cause political pressure among the public, not just in the Tory party. So it really, a lot of pressure looking at the link between rising cases and hospitalisations, because if you can see that the increase in cases isn't leading into extra pressure on the NHS and pressure on hospitals, then the unlocking can go ahead regardless of whether cases are still relatively high.
Tom, I mean, the Tory backbenches are quite busy these days. I mean, the front of The Guardian suggests that, you know, there could well be a vote tomorrow on foreign aid. And indeed, from what I hear, a vote the government could well lose.
Yes, this is one of the striking things about this Parliament, I think, because you have that 80-seat majority, but because I think as a result of Brexit, in part because of all of the kind of parliamentary manoeuvrings and coalitions that created, that Tory backbenchers are far more rebellious than they are even usually, if you like, willing to land blows against the government. Again, it's not necessarily just a kind of small group of awkward squad MPs. And we've seen that on COVID issues. We've seen it on Brexit issues, certainly in previous years. And now we're seeing it focus on this question of foreign aid, and The Guardian picking up on this particular line of attack they have, which is urging the government not to use the plans to transfer our excess vaccines to kind of make up for the 0.2% difference in foreign aid as a result of this foreign aid cut. But yes, it's a striking fact of this Parliament is that in any other era, an 80-seat majority would be something that a government could really sit pretty on. But time and again, we see that majority can disappear very quickly if your MPs are in a rebellious mood.
I mean, Rachel, what are you hearing in terms of the vote in Parliament? As I said, someone very senior spoke to me a little bit earlier on tonight, and they think they've got it.
I'm not surprised because it's so many different factions of Tory rebels here. You've got Tories who really believe in the pledge and international development, or particularly former ministers who have worked in that department and can see the good that that money can do. You've got the Global Britain crowd who really believe that post-Brexit, Britain should be leading the way on the world stage, and part of that is having a real presence in global development and making sure that it's Britain leading in developing nations and not necessarily leaving a gap for countries like, say, China to swoop in and having global influence in that way. It's Tories who don't particularly care, but who believe that it's a manifesto pledge and therefore it's part of their professional political integrity. And then it's also anyone who just doesn't like Boris Johnson and would love the chance to inflict a defeat on his government. So you've got a huge variety of factions with the rebels here. And I think the chance to send a message to the Prime Minister, perhaps to signal their dissatisfaction with all kinds of things that have been going on in government in the past year, that's probably part of it too. So definitely one to watch very closely.
I've got to say, let's stick with the front page of The Guardian, Tom. It's been a long time since I was under 30, so I'm going to have to tap your experience in all of this. Do you think getting stickers and bonuses on dating apps is likely to make young people take the vaccination?
I'm not sure about that. The Department of Health apparently might differ as far as it is teaming up with all of the big dating apps, Tinder, Match, Hinge, Bumble, etc., to try and, as you say, incentivise people on these apps into getting the jab. I guess you would be able to show that you're quote unquote safe once you've already had the vaccination. So it's all part of this, obviously, this discussion to try and encourage young people who are obviously have a vanishingly small chance of getting seriously ill and dying with the virus, but nevertheless, for the sake of keeping a lid on transmissions, urging them to get vaccinated. In my mind, I think it's more about just making the argument to people rather than trying to do these little inducements and sticker campaigns on dating apps. I'm not 100% sure, but shows the concern that's definitely government about whether or not the under 30s will take the vaccine when they're called up for. A lot of anxiety about that at the moment.
Yeah, Rachel, what's your view? I have to admit, I'm just looking at some of the names of these dating apps, and I've never even heard of half of them. What's your view?
I've tried most of them with limited success, I must say. I think my most successful dating app is definitely Twitter. I do find it slightly distasteful, the idea of signalling your health status on a dating app, people being that public about quite intimate personal health details. I mean, it makes sense from a vaccination campaign. I wouldn't like to see it with anything else. I prefer the strategy in various US states where they've had bars offering free beer if you get a vaccine. No one offered me a free anything when I got mine, and I would very much have appreciated a thank you for getting a vaccine. Here's a G&T. Although, the drinkerware is saying you're not meant to drink after them, so not sure about that. But yeah, free beer or lottery ticket entry rather than dating app stickers, definitely the way to go.
Welcome back to the press preview. Tom and Rachel still taking us through the stories of the day. This is an interesting one, and Rachel, let's come to you first. The royal birth, a story which, if you're on social media, has appeared to divide people into three camps: complete excitement, complete indifference, or utter outrage. The front of the Daily Mirror, into which camp does it fall?
I think that's a fairly standard. There is a new member of the royal family. I don't think that it's sort of playing into the manufactured culture wars that we have to have every time Harry and Meghan do anything. Like, the royal family is an institution. This child is now, I think, 8th in line to the throne, possibly displacing Prince Andrew. Maybe just a reminder that Prince Andrew is still a member of the royal family, and it is going to be covered in some way. They've picked a name which has family resonance. That's fine too. That's about as excited as I can get about this, and I think that the Mirror sort of reflects that. We have to acknowledge it. It's happened. This child now exists. Congratulations to them. We can leave it that.
I like that. This child now exists. Lily, as we should call her, not Lily. But Tom, let's leave aside the fact that I still can never understand this phenomenon of people naming their child one thing and then calling it another thing. But the front of the Daily Star, they're having perhaps slightly more fun with this than some of the other papers.
Yes, the ever-irreverent Star there saying woman has a little baby, and with slightly less fanfare, you see elsewhere. As a Republican, I struggle to get excited even about the royal babies, which are people who are still working in the royal family. I tend to be more on kind of Team Daily Star, if you like, on this particular issue, not finding it particularly interesting. But as Rachel was saying, these things are of significance, unfortunately, because of the fact we still have a monarchy. So these people do have power, influence just from birth, essentially. So that's why naturally all these things do become a big story whenever a new child exists, as Rachel put it.
Well, I have to say, Lily is a very nice name. So, and I think if we ended on a positive note, that is probably for the best. We will see you both a little bit later, in fact, at 11:30. For now, though, thanks very much indeed.